Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for joining my channel. Let me just announce real quick that Chess Audiobooks is at leechess.com, chess.com. I play mostly 1 minute games, some longer games, but mostly 1 minute. So if you have some free time, come and join me there. Become my friend there. I would love to engage you in some games. Also, Chess Audiobooks is on Twitter, Instagram, and please hit that thumbs up button because that allows my videos to be seen by more people. So today we're stepping in the time machine. We're going to the year 1980. We're stepping out at the 1980 Chess Olympiad, which took place in Malta. As you can see on the map below, it's south of Sicily island, and it's northwest of Tunisia, so off the coast of northern Africa. And they played in a town, city of Valletta in Malta. Malta, by the way, is an independent country. If you didn't know that, it was owned by the British, occupied by the British until 1964, when it gained its independence. And so the tournament itself, the Chess Olympiad, took place in Valletta, and you can see from some of the pictures there, directly to my left, actually my right, probably your left, but you see Yasser Serouan with the full head of hair, closest to the wall in the venue that they played in, and I think he was on board 2, I want to say. And right next to him with the glasses is Grandmaster Lev Albert, who's the author of many books, and probably most notably famous for just being adherent to the Alekhines defense with the black pieces at the Grandmaster level. In the picture, in the upper right hand corner, is the Soviet team at the time. Part of the members, all of the members aren't there, but so from left to right is Lev Polgaevsky, who's kind of looking away. And there's a young 17-year-old Garry Kasparov, who was international master at the time, rated 25.95. And holding the trophy and talking to him is world champion at the time, Anatoly Karpov, looking slim and trim. And behind him is a smiling F.M. Geller. So they had a very strong team. It was a tough tournament. A Hungarian team came in second, led by Portish. And third was Yugoslavia, led by Bojevic. So as you can see by the photos, Kasparov has the white pieces up at top. I'm sorry, has the black pieces. I'm sorry. And the guy on the bottom is a Bulgarian international master at the time. He's a grandmaster now. He became grandmaster in 1988. Krum Georgiev. So at the time, he was international master, and so was Garry Kasparov, who played reserve board, by the way. This Soviet team was very strong. Tao was on this team. Also, I forgot to mention Yuri Balashov. So Kasparov was just on a reserve board. One thing I want to mention about Kasparov is that he played in I wrote this down. He played in 8 chess Olympiads. He only lost 3 games. So his overall record in all the chess Olympiads that he participated in, 50 wins, 29 draws, and 3 defeats. So Kasparov was, of course, incredible, as we know. Yeah, long time control, of course, back then, 40 moves, 2 hours and 30 minutes, and then an extra hour for the next 16 moves. One of the notable Soviet players that weren't there is Petrosian. I didn't really get to find out why Petrosian wasn't there at that particular Olympiad, why he was off the team. Korchnoi hadn't defected yet, so Korchnoi should have been there, but he was not because he was actually preparing for his match against Robert Hübner of Germany, who wasn't there also. All right. So now, with all of that said, we're gonna get right into the game. So again, we have uh, Krum Georgiev with the white pieces, international master, against strong beast of a player, Garry Kasparov. So the game started off E4, C5 from Kasparov, uncompromising defensive play, knight of 3, D6. So we're right in the Sicilian territory, right? No closed Sicilian, no Alapins, no, F4 Grand Prix attacks. We, just classical open Sicilian. Najdorf from Kasparov, Bishop G5. So no backing down from Georgiev here. E6, F4. So we have the old school Sicilian, right? Queen C7, Queen F3. So white is just preparing castle queen side, rapid development, throw all he has at black. Let me just briefly say that black has an open C file for some compensation, and also he has a pawn preponderance in the center. Having those E and D pawns in the center make it difficult for white to utilize his lead in development. All right, so this is one of the things that make the Sicilian so hard to crack for white, is because black having a preponderance in the center with those pawns, the E and D pawns, it makes it hard for white to use the D5 square and the E5 squares as jumping points. So usually what white will try to do in some openings is provoke black to make, say, a move like E5 at an inopportune time, thus giving up the D5 square. Or have black play the move D5 at an inopportune time, so where he might cause a weakness in a position, perhaps creating an isolated pawn or just opening up the E file too early. All right, so that gives black a lot of counterplay and resistance in the position, this pawn preponderance and this open C file, and this is why the Sicilian is so rich in complications and tactical nuances. There's a lot in here, and it takes a lifetime to master, and you still are not going to be able to master this opening. All right, B5. Again, Kasparov just going for the juggler here. Castles, this is all known at the time. And then B4. So this was very popular move at the time in a sharp position. Now, let me look at it like a rank, like just amateur player, right? I say I just read, some basic book on chess. This is how I'm looking at it, from that perspective. I see that white has a lead in development, okay? And white has a space advantage. So, what do I want to do if I have a lead in development and space advantage? I want to open the position, all right? Problem here in the Sicilian is that it's a semi-closed opening. It's not like a King's Gambit or Evans Gambit where, you get the position's wide open, you sacrifice on F7 and this and that. So, although black is behind in development, it's hard to get at the king. All right, it's hard to exploit this, but this is a burden that white has to deal with. White has to figure it out, because what happens is, hey, white can't really utilize his lead in development. Black develops behind, these two pawns on D and E6 castles. Next thing you know, he's caught up in development, and he already has the open C file and his counterplay already established on the queen side, and that usually leads to trouble for white. All right, this is why Georgiev plays E5, because you have to fight in the Sicilian. The Sicilian is not an opening that, if you're white, that you can play passively, because you will get into trouble quickly. All right, the opponent will be all over you. So you have to be willing. If you're gonna allow Sicilian, you have to be willing, especially open Sicilian. You have to be willing to engage tactically. This is what Georgiev does. He plays the move E5, and as I have highlighted, you can see, yes, black is attacking the knight on C3, but the white queen is attacking the rook on A8, and he's also attacking the knight Okay, so on f6. So what to do here? Kasparov plays the theory. Bishop b7. So now he's attacking the queen. So now, surely, white has to do something about that. Let me just show you the alternative. Of course, if he plays b takes c3, he's just gonna lose material. So for instance, b takes c3, e takes f6, c takes b2. King b1 is an excellent move because it kind of reestablishes the castling of the castle of white there, right? Because that pawn, although it's a black pawn, is protecting the king. All right. Let's say bishop b7. This is a sample line. Queen e3, and you can see the build up on the e6 square, and this is where main theme in the Sicilian where black will run into problems there. So for instance, bishop d5, right, trying to prevent the sacrifice on e6. Knight takes e6 anyway. Bishop takes e6, f5. Same thing will happen if the f pawn took. Okay. And let's say instead of bishop d5, queen d7, bishop c4, again with the same idea of sacrificing on e6. So I'm not going to go into the whole line because like my analysis of this game runs very deep. But I'm just giving you something that you can, research yourself and look further into if you desire. But b takes c3 is no good. Bishop b7 is what's played. And here, Georgiev unfurls a shocking move, especially at this time. He plays knight c b5. All right, these players are battling for the initiative. Kasparov is like Mr. Initiative, right? So here's this player, right, relatively unknown. Kasparov is unknown too at the time, right? He's rising through the ranks, but he's definitely known as a force. He's already had some scalps, but still he's not Kasparov. That we know him. As now, right? So knight c b5. So they're playing for the initiative. So now both queens are attacked. Okay. This again, you have to like this style of play if you're gonna choose this opening, because these murky positions, the unclear positions, are not for everyone. Kasparov plays a takes b5, so he eliminates the threat. Bishop is still hitting the queen, and he has this idea, down the road of rook takes a2, right? Again, for those of you who are not tactically proficient, if bishop takes f3 here, that just loses a piece. Knight takes c7, king d7, knight takes a8, bishop d1, for instance, and e takes f6. All right, so you definitely have to be tactically sound when you're playing the Sicilian. You have to be strong tactically. If you're not a real good tactician, you have to either work on your tactics or avoid these mainline Sicilians. So a takes b5, bishop takes b5 check. So again, black cannot capture the queen on f3. And so now, critical point in the game. So Kasparov plays a natural move, knight fd7 here, right? Because the knight has been attacked, right? So why not kill two birds with one stone, right? You stop the attack on the piece and you deal with the check. All right. So here, again, I want to bring up the topic that I brought up earlier, and that is this attack on e6, and also the idea of what to do when you have space advantage and lead in development, because regardless of the opening, the principles are still going to apply. All right, so here you can see black's pieces are not developed properly. Okay, there's some kind of an uncoordinated look about black's position. So Georgiev plays knight takes e6. I have highlighted in yellow all the pieces of black that are really out of the game. Okay, and the thing is if you can't get to black when he's like this, he'll slowly consolidate his position, develop, like bishop e7, knight c6, castles, and then that pawn preponderance. Then he'll play d5 eventually, right? He'll get all of that stuff in. The rooks will come to c8 and d8, and next thing you know, he'll be attacking. And with that open c file, he'll have plenty of counterplay in the position, if not, become better. So here, Georgiev hits Kasparov before he can really get started. And that's the thing. That's why I move b4 for black is double edged, because he's really starting a fight before he's really developed. It's kind of like, say you're a kid and you had like 7 brothers, right? But you go out on the street and you start a fight with 2 guys, right? And you're doing it because you got more brothers at home. But you start the fight, but before you could get back to your brothers, they beat you down, because you started the fight too early. You started while you were outnumbered. So black is kind of is doing that, right? It's risky. It's double edged. He's kind of starting a fight before he gets his pieces out, and hoping that he can hold hold white back somewhat until he catches up in development, and then his investments that he made earlier will show. Here, Georgiev is up to the challenge. He plays knight takes e6. Okay. F takes e6. Again, the queen was attacked on c7. And you can see still the bishop is still attacking the queen on f3. F takes e6, and now queen h3. But notice when white moves, he moves, but he still has threats. He's still moving with tempo. He's not just losing time. This I have highlighted. E6 pawn, so king f7. And Kasparov's idea is to get his king out of danger, is tuck his king on a g8 at some point. f5, again, still fighting for the initiative, right? There's an old quote attributed to Frank Marshall, first American chess champion, that he basically said, you want to play your attack so that when the fire is out, it isn't out. Basically meaning that you always want to be able to, have some, keep the initiative going. All right. So after queen h3, king f7, black's attack isn't over, right? Because he has f5. White's attack isn't over because he has f5. In other words, he's able to keep throwing wood onto the fire to keep it going, right? Don't just have one move attacks where you attack something, they defend, and that's it. Okay, especially after you sacrifice a piece. So you want to attack in a way that when they think the fire's out, it's not out. You just keep having, you have something else, right, in reserve. So f5. Bishop e5. Again, Kasparov is a great tactician, so he recognizes what's going on. So he threatens mate, and then in some variations, rook takes a2. F takes e6 check. This drives the king into the corner. So now white is threatening again, of course, to take the knight on d7, but mate is threatened on c2. Notice the double-edged nature of the position. Mate is threatened, rook a2 in some lines. So now what? Queen b3. Notice again how Georgiev defends all threats, but he has a threat of his own, which is to take the pawn. I'm sorry, to take the knight on d7. All right. This reminds me of something I read. Former world champion Emanuel Lasker say in one of his books. I can't remember, but he was saying basically, and I'm paraphrasing here. He was saying basically that when you have to make a defensive move, try to make a defensive move, but that has some bite to it, that attacks also. Just don't make a pure defensive move where your opponent can just go on attacking you, right? Where you're just constantly on a defensive cycle, constantly blocking, bobbing, weaving, right? You have no offense. You just constantly ducking and dodging, right? That's bad because eventually your resources of defense are probably gonna run out. But he said if you can, always try to find a defensive move that had offense to it because you want to turn your defensive cycle into an offensive cycle. You don't want to just be on defense. You want to parry, parry the attack and attack right away. Kind of like Jeet Kune Do, right? Where you're not just blocking, right? For those that don't know, Jeet Kune Do is martial arts that was started by Bruce Lee. But anyway, you're not just blocking like, don't hit me anymore. No. When the blow comes, boom, you're catching it. So you're defending and your defense is your offense. That's what you see here by Georgiev. You have all of this being attacked here. Queen B3 stops all of the attacks, but he still has the attack on the knight. Okay? Again, Kasparov, great tactician. What does he do? Kasparov plays bishop takes c2. Right? He wants to give back the material. That's what they say, right? You're being attacked and all that. So he says, you know what? I'm going to give back material, simplify the position. Okay? Another idea for Kasparov was to play knight c5 here, attacking the queen. All right? And so queen c4, d5, and then rook d5 is very powerful. Remember, we have to keep the initiative going. Knight takes e6. And now this move is killer. Rook c5. I've highlighted the arrow to show you that the knight is pinned to the king. All right? So you have the queen being attacked by the rook on c5. The queen cannot capture. So queen f7, right? The problem with this move, I mean, I just show it to you. If queen takes, hopefully you can see it right now. If queen takes the rook on c5, then the queen on c4 will just capture the knight, and that will be mate. Can you see it? That's why I drew this arrow. So if the queen comes up, then you don't capture the queen, you would just capture the knight on e6. So the other move is bishop takes c5. So bishop takes c5, queen takes e6, and this time the queen can come back, but white is still winning here. Queen c8. Again, if bishop f8. If queen f8, then bishop c4. Check. Okay, and then the queen is, and then that's checkmate, actually. This is why bishop f8 has to be played, and now bishop c4. And let's say bishop d5, for example, trying to preserve the queen, then just e6. All right. And black is lost here. And go back. So instead of bishop takes c5, if queen f7, rook f1, and the brutality begins. Let's say bishop f5, for example. Rook goes to c8, queen g6, and h4. And again, I highlighted everything. All kind of threats are on the board. You can see that the bishop on f8 is being doubly attacked by the rooks. The rook on c8 and the rook on f1 if this bishop on f5 is moved. That's why one of the threats here is g4, hitting the bishop, because once that bishop moves, then the bishop on f8 will fall. The other threat I've highlighted in red, which is bishop e8. Okay, bishop e8, and notice that the queen is trapped. Alright, so knight c5 doesn't work out. So Kasparov decided, let me just try to simplify, trade pieces. So queen takes c2, queen takes c2, king takes c2, and now knight to e5. Okay, e7, Okay, and this is why the material is even, right? E7. Notice black never really gets developed, and this is fascinating because this is Kasparov we're talking about, right? In a slow game, this is 2 hour game, 40. This is not blitz. This is not Kasparov at age 60. This is Kasparov at age 17. 2 hour game. You know, so he's playing right, near his peak. And it's a fascinating game. So bishop takes e7, bishop takes e7. All right. So now the material is even, but again, look at the development. And notice the attack. I have it highlighted on the D pawn. How is black gonna protect that? No way. So for all intents and purposes, black is pretty much strategically lost at this point, because the isolated pawn on d6 is gonna fall, and then this advanced pawn, right, b4, that's just kind of out there waiting to be picked off, right? White has better rooks, better minor pieces, better king, and better pawns. So that all equals a better game and a win. So knight b6, bishop takes. So now white officially goes up a pawn. And you might be wondering, why not take the Kasparov played rook a5. You might be saying, hey, why not even up the material and play rook a2? Problem is, if rook takes a2, then bishop takes e5. Okay? And the problem is this long diagonal here. I like highlights. Problem is this long diagonal with the king and rook on the diagonal. So eventually you're going to get this happening. Okay? So for instance, so after rook takes a2, bishop takes e5, knight e5. Okay? Now, one of the variations just up in the air would just be, right, just to try to attack this knight. But white has something better. He just plays rook d8 check, king f7, and then rook takes h8. And all these variations spring out because of the lack of development from black and the energetic sacrificial play from white. All right. So back to the game. Bishop takes d6, rook a5. So now you know why rook a2 wasn't played. Rook a5, attacking the bishop. Rook d5, and now the knights are in trouble. The knights are like paralyzed. They really can't move because one of them is gonna get captured. So Kasparov, being a brilliant tactician, comes up with a great idea. He plays rook takes b5, rook takes b5. It looks like he's giving up the exchange, but there's a fork. Knight d4 check, king b1, knight takes b5, attacking the bishop. And again, material equality is achieved on the board except one pawn. All right. So again, if we look at the pieces, black is worse, right? White has a better king. Well, actually, we could say the kings are even, right? They both have equal access to the board, right? But we'll say white's rook is better because black's rook is just trapped in the corner. And we'll say that bishop is better than that knight, especially in this open position. That knight has no outpost, so the knight is kind of like, not a good piece. And if you notice too, the knight is cut off. The bishop being centralized like this, is cutting this knight off. The knight really can't go anywhere except to bad squares, right? The knight only can go to bad squares like a7, and that's it without being captured. So Kasparov played king f7, and now Georgiev played rook c1, king e6, trying to decentralize the knight, right? Decentralize the bishop. Bishop is very powerful. Georgiev is playing inspired chess here. Rook c5, knight d6, king c2, rook f8, and now bishop d4. This protects the second rank. Rook f1, and now rook e5. Bishop c5, and again we see this attack on the b pawn. This is one of the things about the Sicilian, like that you'll see a lot of, especially when white, wins, is that sometimes that early advance of the queenside pawns will come back to haunt black later on in the game, right? That a6, b5, b4, that's great in the early opening in the middle game, but then once things start, the heavy pieces start getting traded off, those pawns sometime left, as a weakness. The early events. It reminds me of what happens in the Ruy Lopez classical variations a lot, right? You have a6, b5, then eventually, those pawns, get attacked, say with like a4, then one of the pawns advances, then you get in the endgame, and those pawns are there just, kind of like cannon fodder at one point. Here, Georgiev has a double attack here. Since the knight is kind of handicapped in this open position, it constantly needs protection from the pieces. So here, the black king has to stay close to that knight. So Georgiev is attacking the b4 pawn, but he's threatening to win the knight, or at least simplify the game by playing rook d5, and basically forcing the trade of everything. The rook will have to come back to f6 to protect the knight, and then Georgiev could just trade off and then just win with the extra pawn. This is why king c6 is played, and Kasparov, instead of allowing that, just gives up the pawn. Bishop takes b4 because he feels he has better chance with the the pieces on the board than just giving up the he has a better chance, or rather, he has to give up this pawn rather than allow, just everything being traded off. So bishop takes b4, rook f2 check, king c1, and again, same issue, because now the rook is threatening e6, and you got this pin. So this is why Kasparov cannot capture on g2 like he wants to. So knight b7. This gives white time to protect the g2 pawn. g6, a3, and of course Kasparov is lost at this time, but let's see what happens. Rook a2, king b1, rook f2, king a2. The knight is just looking for meaning. Knight d8, rook c5 check, rook d5 hitting the knight. This should show you how sometimes knight is very bad in open positions, like this. This is definitely not a good position for a knight. Knight c6, bishop c3, and notice how Georgiev's not quick to trade the bishop for the knight because he knows that knight is bad. Rook takes g2, rook d7 check, king moves, and so Georgiev still remains a pawn up, 2 pawns up rather. King b7, king b3, rook g4, rook d7. Kasparov is just trying to hold on here. Rook h4, rook d2, rook h3, rook g2, knight d4, king a2, knight f5, and now bishop e5, because the idea here is just, again, white wants to capture the pawn, so pawn on g6, so he protects his pawn at h2 first. So rook e3, tagging the bishop. Bishop's a nice long range piece, so the bishop's like, I'm out of here, but I'm still going to protect. Kasparov goes passive, rook g4, rook g4, knight e7, bishop g3. So you see Georgiev is just being patient. He's kind of torturing black a little bit here. a4, king a3, rook f6, b3, no rush. Just gradually gaining space here. Rook g4, rook comes to c5, a5, just gradually pushing the pawns home. b4, knight d4, Bishop e5. Bishop b2. Again, just dominating the board. And keeping the knight out too. Knight d2, rook c3, and then king a4. And finally, after 63 moves, Kasparov had enough and resigned. So just amazing game by international master at the time from Bulgaria, Krum Georgiev. A lot of people are familiar with the Krum Georgiev, but this is Krum Georgiev. Yeah, this game was just a fascinating game, and that's why I told you at the beginning about Kasparov's record in the chess Olympiads. Like I said, he only lost 3 games. This is his first loss in 1980 at the chess Olympiad. He wouldn't lose another game until I believe I'm gonna say 1984 chess Olympiad. But yes, I mean, what did I say? 50 wins, 29 draws, and 3 losses. Okay, so we're talking about 82 games here and 3 losses, and this is one of them. And this was definitely a fantastic effort by Georgiev. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that game. There's a lot of analysis that I put into this game. I didn't share it all, of course. I don't want to put you guys to sleep. I try to bring out the most relevant variations, and maybe some ones that you might be interested in researching yourself, or if you're interested in researching this opening more, but just some common themes. Again, sacrifice on e6, that's a common theme in the Sicilian defense. Also, just basics, lead in development, lead in space, gives you an idea how you have to play. When the position is semi-closed and you gotta lead in development, sometimes you gotta consider those piece sacrifices, because that's the only way you're gonna be able to realize your advantage here. So that's all for this video. Again, I hope you enjoy it. Please hit that thumbs up button, because that's very important to get the video moving in the algorithm of YouTube. And I would love for people to see this video, so feel free to share it. Also, support my channel by clicking on the links below. There's DVDs, there's a donation link, and there's also books for you old school players out there that like to still read chess books, and you have your chessboard right next to you with your cup of coffee, like they used to do back in the days. There's some books, book links below for you. So tell me what you thought about this game, and I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.